Hi, it's Andrew and welcome to another edition of the Performance Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about all things human performance. Optimize performance through adapting your physical, psychological and emotional state. This week on the Performance Intelligence Podcast, I'm joined by Anthony Seibold. Originally from Rockhampton, Anthony is head coach of the Manly Warringah Sea Eagles. After a professional playing career, Anthony transitioned into coaching, where his strategic mind and focus on high performance and attention to detail quickly made him a standout. Anthony's coaching journey includes stints as an assistant coach for the Queensland State of Origin team and Melbourne Storm. He made his mark in the NRL as head coach of the South Sydney Rabbitohs, leading them to a preliminary final in 2018 and earning the prestigious Dally M Coach of the Year award. Anthony has also worked as head coach at the Brisbane Broncos and assistant coach for England's National Rugby Union team under Eddie Jones. Following a challenging tenure at the Broncos, Anthony demonstrated resilience and growth, bringing his expertise back to the NRL with the Manly Sea Eagles, and he has recently, I'm happy to announce, signed a 2-year extension deal. Anthony holds a Masters of Education from the University of Southern Queensland, a Bachelor of Teaching from the Australian Catholic University, and has lectured at the University of Southern Queensland in their Faculty of Education. He's also completed leadership programs at Harvard and Stanford universities. Anthony Seibold, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here, Maisie. It's just a little bit uncomfortable you calling me Anthony all the time.
I don't think I've ever called you Anthony in your life.
Maybe the first time we met. That's probably it.
So we'll set it now, Seibs.
Yeah, that's it.
Anthony Seibold. I love in Australia in sport, a nickname is add an O and E, an S, or it's an animal, exactly, so we'll call you Seibs.
Yeah, that's
I think Paul Devlin calls you Seibsy boy. He said there's a story in Seibsy boy as well.
Yeah, he does.
Now, we could talk about a lot on NRL and what you've done in teams and what you've learnt. You did a great podcast recently, Moonshot with Tatiana, and as I listened to that, I went, God, I learnt a lot of questions because Tatiana asked from someone not in sport. She's got a tennis background, but a lot of the work you'd done, what you'd done yourself. So if anyone wants to listen to that, it's a great podcast to listen to. I want to take a different angle today. I look at you as a coach, but you're an educator. You've taught me a lot. In fact, my team, Angela Poon, who I work with closely at Performance Intelligence, said recently after a corporate program, she said, Andy, you've changed the way you teach. I said, let me tell you where that started. It was a lot of the frameworks I've learned from you. So a rough frame today. One, I'd like to talk about your education in coaching and how that started around doing a dip ed. Key insights from your early coaching career when you were young, fresh, some of the wins and some of the challenges. And then I really want to double click point 3, your frameworks, the people you've learned from, what you do for memory recall, even how you bring in health and fitness. I think there's a massive learning in that, mate. So even if someone's listening to this going, oh, Maisie's there banging on with one of his sporting mates, and this is not a podcast about sport. This is a podcast about teaching, about learning, about memory recall, and then wrapping all that up. What do you do to then build a world-class team? So they're the 4 frameworks I'd like to start today.
Yeah, it's great, interesting. And all those things, I can share some experiences and some learnings. So I'm looking forward to it, Maisie.
So let's go back. Young Queenslander, did you have the big hair? Like what were you like as a young kid?
No, I wasn't. One of my favourite players in the NRL, because I followed it very closely, was Ellery Hanley. He was the Englishman who came across in about 88 and played for the Bellamy Tigers.
Weapon of an athlete, wasn't he?
Well, I tried to have a haircut like him when I was 14 or 15, so I was very short. I don't think my mum and dad were too happy, but I was from Rockhampton, and I ended up going to a Catholic school there in Rocky, a Christian Brothers school, and then I did my last 2 years at St Brendan's College at Yeppoon, which is about 40 minutes drive away from Rocky, and boarded there for 2 years, which was fantastic. Like they're still my best mates in life now, it's great to catch up with them. But
just on that, and so we got a rough script. You know how we work on this. We sort of weave and duck and dodge. Just the dodgeball, the 5 Ds of dodgeball: dodge, dive, duck, dip, and dodge. You had a birthday recently. I think was it your 40th? May have been.
Well, another 10 years, but 50.
What I loved is a mate of yours, and he was one of your mates from Rocky. And you've got people like that. They keep you grounded, don't they? So as your trajectory has gone up. What I really enjoyed seeing is your bogan mates, and I say that, I'm from Dubbo, so bogan with respect. they know who you were as a 16, 17-year-old kid making all these mistakes, and they're still there now as those strong roots.
Yeah, I think I've been really blessed. I was in a room of 4 people, so myself and 3 others for 2 years, right? So think about when you're 15, 16, and then ultimately turning 17 when I was finishing school. Same group for 2 years, so you get to know each other really well. It's essentially those guys were and are still, my best friends. 2 of them were in my bridal party. I've been in bridal party for a couple of those guys as well. So I had about 8 or 9 guys that I went to St Brennan's with down for my 50th, and it was great just to spend some time that weekend with them. And they do keep me grounded. They take the piss out of me quite a bit, I've got to say, particularly when I'm sort of on telly. But they're great people, and I think they have that real sort of, country Queensland sort of mentality and feel, and that's what I like.
And you say keep you grounded. I think, we can get so caught up in the life, and life as a head coach, it's tough. Look, the only parallel I've said to you before is it's probably running a big company as CEO. When the company's going really well, awesome, look at the share price, great business. They don't really talk about the CEO. When the team's playing well, who do they look at? Oh, awesome players. When we're not playing well, who is it? Oh, it's the coach. So it's pretty quick to point the finger at the coach, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I think as a head coach, I take responsibility for the program. So I want the players to get the plaudits when we're playing well. I think that's really important. And I think the buck stops with somebody. So I think in the NRL world or the AFL world here in Australia, I think it's the head coach. And so ultimately, you are sort of in charge of that environment. So I sort of get the scrutiny that comes with that.
So we go back to the young punk from Rockhampton with the Ellery hand.
Yeah.
Have you got a photo of that?
I don't know. I probably do. Yeah.
If we find one, we
I ended up having a flat top at one stage too. So
a flat top. This is great.
It was bad.
So how did you get into being an educator?
Yeah.
Because there's coaching and then there's teaching and embedding. It's a different process.
Yeah, it definitely is. I was really lucky to have some great teachers at school. And Paul Bunn was the sports master and my health and phys ed teacher at St Brennan's College. He's worked with the Melbourne Storm for the last 12, 13 years as their head of recruitment. Small world. Before that, he was with Wayne Bennett at the Broncos for probably about a decade. So again, really small world. But he had a great influence on me, Paul. And I don't see him too much lately, and I probably haven't told him this, but he was certainly really influential in me wanting to become a teacher, along with 2 other teachers from my early days, Kerrod Bendel and Con Marinan, who had me in primary school. And they really sort of made an impact on me, along with my dad, who made the biggest impact. But they were 3 really good educators. And then probably the next impact was when I signed for Brisbane Broncos. I was 17 years of age, and the head of recruitment was a guy called Cyril Connell. Now, Cyril was a legend in education and rugby league in Queensland. He played for Australia in the 56 Kangaroo Tour to the UK and France, but he was essentially the head of education in Queensland for a number of years. And so when he recruited me, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, from Rocky, I either want to be a school teacher or a policeman." And he said, "Look, I reckon, why don't you go down the school teaching route? Because wherever you go with footy, because you've got to remember in the early 90s, rugby league wasn't full time. He said, wherever you go with footy, you'll always have a job." And so he sort of influenced me there, Cyril. And so, those 3 or 4 people probably set me on the path of becoming a school teacher. So I was actually 21, believe it or not, teaching year 6. I was playing second grade for Brisbane and teaching year 6 during the week, and then flying away and playing on the weekend.
Think of some of our boys at Manly, 21. Imagine
I can't believe it,
teaching
mate.
you.
Yeah, and in all honesty, looking back, I probably wasn't ready to be a school teacher because of my maturity levels as far as, you've got, 10, 11-year-old kids in your charge. But I felt as though I did a decent job, but I just look back and think, it's hard to even think that I was teaching year 6 as a 21-year-old, I've got to say.
In coaching psychology, there's a term called lag time. And lag time is it takes a while to catch up where you're at. We often catch up through other people. So when you look back at that and think, learning you're a sponge, you're playing footy, it was tough then. My Broncos were a top team.
They were.
So hard to get in there. So plan B as well. So go do teaching just in case it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, definitely. Cyril spoke about that. One of the things Broncos were, I was really fortunate, mate. I was a bit of a journeyman as a player, but I was fortunate to play first grade down at the Raiders. But if you reflect back on the 90s, the 2, along with Manly, probably 3 big clubs, were Brisbane Broncos, Canberra Raiders and Manly, right?
Raiders were my team. We lived at Yass, so we used to watch all the games.
Go. And so Bob Fulton tried to sign me when I was 17. And, now being the head coach there is it's almost like a full circle. Now, I didn't come down because I sort of thought, Sydney might be a bit too big for me. And so I signed at Brisbane, but I wasn't good enough to play first grade there. They had the side where they won a couple of premierships in a row. But one thing that Cyril did there, he set up this program for the younger players, and it was off-field stuff. So we do media training, we would do all sorts of first aid certificates. It was almost like an education. I remember every Tuesday night we'd have a session. It's almost like what we do now with some of the players.
I was just thinking, as you're saying this, it's interesting.
Which is like 30 years later, right? So Broncos were way ahead of their time. Then when I went to the Raiders, they were had great connection with the AIS. So John Wazer, a guy who probably still works at the AIS, was doing the well-being and welfare for the Raiders back then. So again, you think about this is 25 years ago, 26 years ago. And so, had some great influences. Not every club was doing that, but both those clubs were leaders on the field, but they also were leaders off the field. And so I was really fortunate to be at both those clubs, and they actually put time and valued what you did away from footy and what you did off field. I reckon that has a big influence in sort of my thinking, wanting the guys to do something on their day off. So whether it's study, we've got Ethan Bullymore who goes and works as a stockbroker on the day off, and I really encourage that.
How good's Bully? Well, he's from up your way as well.
Yeah, he's Springshore boy, actually.
And you see photos of him out fishing. He looks like the modern day Albie Mangles, doesn't he?
I know. He doesn't know whether he's a cowboy, miner, or a stockbroker.
I think Bully's good at everything.
He's very good at everything. Yeah, no, he is. But in saying that, that was sort of very influential to me. And so I think both those programs were way ahead of their time, particularly how they develop people off the field.
As I reflect, in all domains, and I'm blessed to work across sport, business, entrepreneurs and defence, you become an overnight success in 20 years. And you started coaching young at your NRL, but you were doing your apprenticeship. You go back then, 20, 21 years of age. You're playing second grade back then, it was called, and you're coaching. So you're getting the reps and sets, the skills at a really young age, where a lot of people don't get that for another 10 or 15 years when they're wrapping up their footy. Yeah,
definitely. I think rugby league went full-time probably, I think it was 1996 into 97. And so 97 I signed for Canberra Raiders. So just as it went full time. So I had a little break. I played 4 or 5, maybe 6 years professional rugby league just as a full-time footy player. But either side of that I taught. And so even when I come back from the UK, because I played over there in the English Super League, I became a teacher. And when I retired over there, I came back and Broncos got me to come in and actually help with their reserve grade, be a bit of a mentor with their reserve grade back in 2005, when guys like Sam Thaiday, Nev Costigan, Berwick Barnes, the ex-Wallaby, Greg Eastwood, who played for the New Zealand side, a lot of those guys were in that team. And so I was a bit of a mentor for those guys, and that whet the appetite for coaching. I was coaching first 13 rugby league at the school I was teaching at, and then I was working with those guys. And that's where I suppose that sort of transfer from playing, teaching into coaching sort of developed.
So you're on the tools from a young age. And another thing I learned on the podcast, the Moonshot podcast, you were teaching teachers.
Yeah.
Is it so pedagogy, big word,
pedagogy,
right?
Yeah, it's actually a fancy word.
Can we say that? Imagine me saying that to the boys. Mate, what are you talking about?
No, I know. and look, but essentially what it is how to teach, right? So it's just a fancy word for how to teach. And so I worked as that for 18 months at the University of Southern Queensland in the Faculty of Education there, essentially teaching teachers. So it's like the how to, so the use of questioning and feedback and planning, all that sort of stuff was an area that that I was sort of teaching other teachers in, and I got that opportunity because I did a master's and through the University of Southern Queensland, and then the senior lecturer there said, "Why don't you come and work for us?" And so I thought, what a great opportunity. So I actually moved the family. That stage we had 2 girls; they were both very young, and we moved the family to Toowoomba for a little period before getting the coaching full time.
Teaching teachers is going to put your skills under the spotlight, right? You're there, all right, big guy. You're here teaching the teachers.
Right,
There's no better way to sharpen those skills.
Yeah, it was excellent. I think all those different experiences shape how I suppose try and communicate to groups and how to teach, how to check for understanding, how to embed the learning, because that's really it's really important. Look, there's a lot of people out there who think, okay, well, I've told Maisie something once, he should remember it. That's not the way that learning occurs. So, checking for understanding, retrieval, linking one meeting to the next are all different, techniques that I use, but they've been developed over a number of years.
It was interesting researching you, and that's even putting those 4 frameworks together. So, learning, educating. I imagine back then the aspiration wasn't to be a head coach; it was still to play NRL.
As a young guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was trying to make my way. I was quite fortunate. I was playing reserve grade quite young. I actually made my debut in reserve grade my first year down there. I hadn't turned 18 yet, which is quite young back in those days, to play second grade. And I wanted to try and play first grade. And as I said, I wasn't good enough to play first grade at the Broncos, but I ended up playing first grade at the Raiders. So that was something that I wanted to do. And so, coming from Rockhampton, watching, well, it used to be the Winfield Cup in those days, but watching Winfield Cup players actually to play with and against some of the guys that I used to watch on telly as a young guy was actually quite, it was really cool. But in the background, it's quite strange looking back. I believe it or not, I actually used to write heaps of notes from some of the sessions that we would do at the Broncos. Calvin Giles, who's a great S&C guy.
He was a great track and field
coach for the British Olympic team, Australian Olympic team. I used to write down all his sessions. I don't know why I did that, because it was a quite unusual thinking back as a 17, 18, 19-year-old to do that.
Because that's common now. Like you give the boys a book and say, learning, retention.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Back then, and
I don't know whether I saw someone else do it. I don't know. But I just remember I've got all these books at home where I used to write down the sessions. And so something must have intrigued me there, or something must have sort of that connection while I was doing uni at the time, and then writing it down. I don't know. But I was studying to be a H&PE teacher and primary school teacher, so maybe that was something to do with it, but it was quite unusual looking back.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you even do a conversation like this, you sometimes pull on those threads and go, actually, if a young fella came to you and said, Seibs, I want to be an NRL coach, what should I do? Go play. You've got to be a good footballer. Parallel to that, we know it's good for your brain to do something different. You're going to probably have a better career. Go study. Like, you couldn't do anything better than study education. Then if you want to go deeper, what do? You teach, and it embeds it even further.
Well, it does.
So without even crafting that, it's the perfect storm for you, and segue into working with the Melbourne Storm as an assistant coach. So then you're working for Craig Bellamy, one of the modern great coaches. So then you're in an environment to look and soak up and see. So I can imagine your brain was just going, this is freaking
great.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, it was great. I used to jump out of bed every single day. I coached the under-20 side my first year there, and then I was on the NRL staff as one of the assistants for my second and third years there. But I sort of talk about this. It's like an apprenticeship, right? It's like doing a carpentry apprenticeship with a really good builder or foreman. And so I learned absolutely enormous amount there. Both Craig Bellamy and Frank Panizza, who's the GM down there, learned a great deal observing, listening, watching those guys. And then actually to get the opportunity to coach some guys like Cameron Smith and Billy Slater and Cooper Cronk, amongst others there, was just like, it was a great opportunity to learn. I felt as though I added value as well, because I didn't want to just take. But it was fantastic couple of years there from a learning perspective and developing, and it gave me confidence in my coaching. And I still wasn't thinking about being a head coach when I left there and chose to come to Sydney. It was more just, what a great experience. I want to go now somewhere else and then continue to learn and work with some other players.
We can now watch this podcast on YouTube, but people listening might have seen when you went back. So let's go back about 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And you said, I used to wake up every day. You reminded me of the movie Jerry Maguire. I wake up like the late great Dickie Fox. Every day's a great day.
I love getting up in the morning. I clap my hands and say, this is going to be a great day.
Where was that emotion when you went back to that? What was the excitement when you were there? You lit up when you said that.
Well, I just think because I was learning so much. Like, I was learning and I was adding value. And one of the things that Bellamy did very well was delegate. Delegate and empower the staff. So you had a really clear, defined role to play in the organisation, and then you could really go after it. And I think that was great, right? When you feel empowered and when you feel like that you're in charge of a certain area. You can really go after it. And so that was why probably I lit up. I learned so much there. It gave me so much confidence in in my coaching, development and the journey of coaching. So I was able to sort of leave there and get some other opportunities elsewhere at a higher level. And that's from that opportunity I started doing the Queensland State of Origin assistant coach for a couple of years. And so when I went into camp, I wasn't a former Origin great, right, which is normally the people they put around the staff. And so I was thinking, I wonder how these guys are going to, adopt me. as someone who didn't play for Queensland at Origin level, but because I'd coached like Smithy and Billy and Cooper and Will Chambers
and you're a Queenslander as well,
and Justin O'Neill, and I was a Queenslander as well. But I had coached probably 5 or 6 of the guys. Timmy Glasby, Munster made his debut there, probably more. I'd already coached those guys, so there was all that level of trust and rapport and relationships already built. So they knew that I would add value. Coming into that,
you would have had a bit
camp.
of imposter syndrome, though. To
start with, first I remember. A little bit like England Rugby, I've got to say. I remember, leading the first meeting that I had to do there with the Origin side. I was just thinking, there's Thurston, there's Greg Inglis, because, your coached against them, right? I hadn't really had anything to do with those guys other than when I first went into Origin camp. So, but I just wanted to make sure I was really well planned, add value. That's what it's in the back of my head, always trying to add value, I felt as though I could add value to those, couple of series that I did. And Kevin Watt was really, I was really lucky that he sort of, trusted me to come in as sort of his, right-hand man there for a couple of years. And I really enjoyed that.
My theory on imposter syndrome, if you don't have it, you're a narcissistic arsehole.
Yeah.
If you have too much, it's debilitating because you make it about you and you're worried about what everyone thinks.
Yeah.
It's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. This amount of imposter syndrome is just right. Yeah. So when I go to a new environment, I now expect it and go, oh, there it is. Yeah. This is because I care, and this means I'm not going to go in there with ego. So it's a real tempering of the right amount. Too little, it's awful to be around. Too much, it just weighs you down. But I can only imagine you were still young then. You're with all these legends.
Yeah.
That's a big lesson in self-regulation. A lot of the work we do, self-talk, internal storytelling, state management.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I think if I hadn't have had that opportunity to do those 3 years full time down with bellyache, and I had a year before I went down. I was doing some work for the Storm up in Queensland, so essentially, almost 4 years involved with the organisation. If I hadn't have gone through those experiences, then I might have been a little bit more nervous or felt like I didn't belong. But because I felt as though Storm were world class with processes, I'd been in that system and worked in the system. I sort of, I was quite confident in what I could do to add value, but that understanding that these guys are the elite of the NRL in front of you, just making sure that, I was well planned and, they saw that I was serious about my coaching, I wasn't there to, I was genuinely there to help them and serious about what we're trying to do.
And then the Rabbitohs, and that's where I first heard of you, being an NRL fan back then. My NRL playing career, Seibs. Do you want to talk about that? Okay, we've done it. But I first saw you as a young coach and I was like, oh, who's this young punk? Yeah, he's coming in there, fit-looking young guy. And I actually thought, yeah, you're young. That year you had a great year. As I said in the intro, Dally M Coach of the Year. If you looked at entry into the top level NRL, you could not have a better year than being awarded a gong like that. And you took that team through to the pointy end as well.
Yeah. Well, the better year would have been if we won the premiership, right?
It would have been a fairy tale.
Which, has happened. I think Trent Robinson, Michael Hagan, maybe Gus School. There's been a couple who have been able to do that. Maybe even Ricky Stewart. So there's been 3 or 4 who've been able to do that over a long period of time. Yeah, look, it was something that was a little bit unexpected, to happen so quickly. But then I reflect on it. I got asked in my first media conference, a bit of a overnight sort of opportunity this. And I said, well, if you call 12 years of working as an assistant or working at, a variety of levels.
What age were you that year?
I wasn't young, but what was I? I was 42, I think.
So it's not 12 years, it's actually 20.
Well, yeah, if you go back to the
education.
teaching, 20 years of it, but actually full-time coaching as my profession had been, I had done 12 years. And I sort of said that, and I said, look, I feel like I've done a fair apprenticeship. Like when you become a builder, you do a 4-year apprenticeship. And, when you do a teaching degree, you do a 4-year degree. I've sort of done 12 years of this, so I feel like I'm ready to go. So I really enjoyed the year, and we had a lot of success. The club had finished 12th 2 years in a row prior, and we sort of for a little bit there, we were actually leading the competition for a long period of time. We got beaten by a really good Roosters side. It was 4-4 half-time in the preliminary final. The last game ever at the old Sydney Footy Stadium, so it was a full house, 40-odd thousand. And they were just too good in the second half there. But we had a hell of a year, and they were such a good group of boys. Great leaders, real common, like a common cause to go after, and really enjoyable experience. Yeah.
So we can go back to that moment. You're a humble guy, But did you have any instances there at the end of the year you looked in the mirror and went, you got this? Like, did you have that, like, this is not easy, but you've done the work, but then your first year, like that was success.
Yeah.
Did you think this is easier than I thought, or hey, I'm going to set bigger aspirations and let's go?
No, it was a lot of hard work, and I remember before the preliminary final, like, and it was the last ever game at the Sydney Footy Stadium. So when I was a young guy, I remember when the grand finals went from the SCG in '87 to the Footy Stadium in '88, and all the big games that had been played there, watched on telly as a kid, and and that type of thing. And lucky enough to play there a couple of times. But I remember just going to my seat in the coach's box before kickoff, and it was full house, and it was just like the atmosphere there was just crazy because the Bunny supporters were out in force, a lot of Rooster supporters there, and I just took a minute to reflect. Going, wow, like how good's this? Like we're one game away from the GF here. And so I sort of, I remember sort of taking a breath and then really trying to narrow my focus to the moment. And but I did. I took a couple of breaths and I thought, what a great ride, And so, but ultimately, we wanted to win. We had a good side there. We wanted to win. We made some really big strides, but ultimately, Roosters were a bit too good for us that particular night.
And then the Brisbane Broncos come calling. So just even just talking about today, you'd played at the Broncos. You had some legends there at the time. Interesting, you said you weren't good enough. Were you not good enough, or did you just not believe you were good enough?
I reckon there was a lot of
the mindset.
Like the stuff. Like I actually got interviewed this morning, and someone said to me, "What would you tell your 20-year-old self?" And I would say, start using mental skills and the tools around that, around visualization, around breathing, around journaling, around down regulation and so on. I wish I had those tools. I didn't. I had a really negative self-talk in my head back as a player at the Broncos because I was comparing myself to Glenn Lazarus or Andrew G or, Trevor Gilmeister, all these guys who were playing.
If anyone doesn't follow
they're all guys who've played for Australia and elite
absolute
players.
legends,
right? And so I kept, that comparing myself. I'm going, I'm 18 or 19, I'm playing myself. How am I going to get picked in front of them? And so I think that negative talk, I didn't have like strategies that we've spoken about and that you talk to our guys about, like the FOP strategy and so on. I didn't have any strategy to deal with that negative self-talk and, your own worst critic. And then, if I had a big night out where I'd sort of try and be the life of the party, the next morning I'd have a lot of self-talk and going, oh shit, I wonder, did I enjoy myself too much? Or, so I had all this self-talk and negative self-talk. When I went to the Raiders, it was the first time I'd ever worked with someone in that mental skills space. I just wish I had it as a young guy. So to answer your question, I felt as though I probably was good enough, but I had a lot of self-doubt. And so I didn't get the best out of myself.
You know my story, why I'm so passionate. I left my best races on low-key minutes. Yeah. Couldn't pull the skills out of my pocket when I needed the most. So then you work with Galen Clues, and Galen was one of the, we talk about mental skills now. She was doing this stuff back 25 years ago. Yeah. She's a legend. Like her stuff is so good.
Incredible. And I actually talk about Galen. So because I played my best year of footy when I was down at Canberra and played first grade, and I pretty much played most of the year in first grade. I broke my sternum, so I missed a few weeks there, but it was a really good year for me personally. I was working with Galen. We were doing scripts. I remember her writing a script back then, so that's 26 years ago. Writing a script, visualization, breathing. I was coming off the bench, do a bit of breathing before you go on. So this is 26 years ago, and it really worked. I went to the Super League, English Super League, and they had, it was just physical, tactical, technical over there. There was no mental skills.
And also liquid.
Super
League, easy recovery, go a couple of points.
100%, yeah. So it was totally different to the NRL, but there was no mental skills coach. And I stopped practicing the tools that had worked the previous.
I didn't realize. So you had this acceleration with Galen, go to Super League and just do it out.
Yeah, and I don't know whether it was a self-discipline or whether, not someone sort of checking in with me as far as the mental skills side of things. And I dropped off on it. And I played some okay footy over there. But, like, I feel like for whatever reason, my best year of footy was actually when I was playing at the highest level of football. But Galen was a big influence. So when I went to South Sydney, I thought, who can I bring in? Because the guys had two tough years, finishing 12th 2 years in a row. And so I thought I'd go back to Galen. So I called Galen and I got Galen to come in, and she worked with the guys that year and made some significant strides using some mental skills with those players here at South Sydney. So, I wish I could tell my younger self, to use, or first of all, learn about some of these skills. And that's why I'm passionate about, what you do with the guys at Manly, because I don't want them to be 20 years down the track and go, shit, I wish I sort of had practiced, some of those mental skills, tools a little bit, more than what I did, it's like that would have, could have.
But also you can pull on that thread. So, the guys of this coaching, educating, leading, I feel the best coaches were good athletes, not great. Sometimes, I won't mention names, but I've seen a few specialist coaches, not at Manly and other teams and other sports, and they come in. So one I will use, because I've said this in a public forum, Mark Waugh, g'day Junior, if you listen to this. I don't know whether Junior's listening to my podcast in amongst all these
one of my favourite cricketers. So hello, Junior.
We'll give a shout out to Junior. I can remember being at a coaching clinic with Steve Rickson. It was at Junee Jail. We went in there and they got all the players, it's not the players, they got all the inmates and said, all right, we're going to do a coaching clinic. So I'm there with Steve Rickson, Mark Waugh, Michael Clark and Warren Smithy from Wagga. And then I'm there as the bloody fitness trainer. So when they put people together, they said, all right, because Smithy was watching, 4 people, no one went to me. Everyone wants to go to Mark Waugh and also to Michael Clark. And then anyway, we had this game of cricket. And at the end, they were asking questions. And one of the inmates said, Mark, what's made you a great catcher? And Mark said, you just watch the ball coming off bat, you put your feet to weight like that and just catch the ball. And then he said, but what do you actually do? And Mark said the same thing, and Stumper looked at me and went, fuck, okay, this is the one time I'm going to let you coach. So Stumper said, Maisie, tell him what's happening. So I said, Mark's putting his feet shoulder width apart. His weight's slightly on the front of his feet. He's watching the ball and the angle for the bowler. So I spoke through, hit the bat, and then he's following the ball right through. And Stumper comes up and goes, look, that was really good. That's the first and last time you coached.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the point being, Junior has no awareness of what made him so bloody good. So I think a really good coach has that awareness, and maybe it's a chip on the shoulder for not getting to that level, and then the chip turns to passion, which is long-term. So interesting, isn't it? You even look back on that. One of your points of difference working with you, and I'm trying to be neutral on this because I know a lot of what you do, is to give the boys those skills at a young age so they don't make the same mistakes that you and I made.
Yeah, well, that's why we're so heavily invested in the mental skills space with you. And I think, to talk to that point, I think in the past, certainly when I played, and probably even up to, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years ago, you'd heavily invest time in the physical side of your prep, your technical side of your prep, and your tactical side of the prep. You get the mental skills coach in early in the preseason. You might see him then at the end of preseason, and if you were losing some games halfway through the season, he'd come back in. And so how is that adding value? How do you, again, going back to some of the stuff that, we'll talk about a little bit later around, retrieving, embedding, the tools, like you need to do, your language, reps and sets. You need to do reps and sets. So I am really passionate about that. And that's why, we've got you coming in a couple of days a week and you're there on game day. You do scripts for the players. You do one-on-ones with the players. And essentially I feel like over the last 3 years, we've really embedded, yourself and the mental skills program into our, into our preparation. And I think if anyone come into our environment, they would see that the physical, the technical, the tactical, and the mental are all just as important as each other. And so, but we retrieve it a lot, don't we? We retrieve it. We link.
It's not my mental skills program. It's our mental skills program.
Yeah.
So from your language, I've got to give a shout out to our colleague and mate, John Clark as well, JC. Like he does a hell of a lot. He's with the boys all the time. Physios are doing it as well. So it's really across the whole program. So it's embedded. Another podcast another day, we can talk more about embedding mental skills. Yeah. But I want to go back. So you've Dally M Coach of the Year. The phone call wouldn't have been a text message in those days. Phone call comes on the big phone and, hey, Seibs, we want you to go to the Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah.
You've just come off the back of a great season on top of the world. That must have been for you a dream to go there and coach as a Queenslander at the penultimate club.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one to talk to because I enjoyed coaching the group at South Sydney so much. In the end, I've said this, so I'll say it again. I ended up making a business decision, and it's one thing that I really regret. You know, I didn't make a decision with my heart. Like, my heart was at South Sydney, and ultimately, you know, you could really clearly say, what the hell was he thinking? You know, why wouldn't he just stay at South Sydney? It was a long-term offer, or long-term deal rather. It was like 5 years with a 6th year in my favour. Like, so I could essentially on day one.
Which again, for someone not familiar with coaching, it's unheard of.
Yeah, it's unheard of. Yeah, and there was a lot of criticism attached to that because it is unheard of, particularly for a first-year rookie coach, right? So essentially what I could do is day one walk in and say, I want to take up the 6th year. So it's a 6-year deal, right? And it was a significant amount of money. But there was the draw to go back home closer to mum and dad. There was the draw to spend a bit more time, you know, in Queensland. But, yeah, I made the decision, and I won't say regret, because I wouldn't be in the situation I am now where I'm coaching Manly, where I coached England Rugby against the All Blacks and Springboks and, you know, some other great experiences. So everything happens for a reason, but I do regret making a decision that was around, you know, money. And that's one thing that I look back on, you know, because that's never been myself, you know, the values. And I went against my values, and I went against, a few things that I stand for there. And but, yeah, ultimately I'm definitely a better coach for having been through, you know, a really challenging period. And I called it a failure because ultimately I was the head of the program up there. And, it wasn't a failure, but, you know, the whole time, like, we made the finals first year with a really young group where we debuted at 11 or 12 guys.
And I've got to say, those guys, well, you got Patrick Carrigan, who's now the captain and gone on to be Australian legend. You mentioned Berrick Barnes, or a whole bunch of players.
Well, yeah, in that group, you know, Tommy Dearden gave him his debut at 18. He's playing for Australia now. Paddy Carrigan gave his debut. We gave him his debut at 20. He's playing for Australia now. Xavier Coates, we gave him his debut at 18. He's now playing for Australia. Tommy Flegler gave him his debut at 19, turning 20, and he's played State of Origin. Herbie Farnworth gave him his debut at 19. He's playing for England. So a lot of those guys are going on to fulfil the potential that we knew they had. But where I made some mistakes, I tried to make too much change. The club had been ingrained in doing things one way for about 30 years. I tried to make too much change straight away. Probably didn't have enough senior players or good leaders around those younger boys. And so when COVID hit in 2020, you talk about being able to handle chaos. We couldn't handle chaos, and the world was a bit different in 2020 for some reason. And so, we started losing games, and it was pretty vicious, you know. So I thought, I can't put myself or my family through that anymore. So I just, made the decision to resign, and I left a lot of money on the table there because I had a long-term deal. And I certainly walked away with some money too, you know, so I needed to make sure that I didn't, lose my house and so on. But, yeah, ultimately it was my decision, and Carl Morris tried to talk me into staying for the rest of the season, but I was done, and my time was done there.
It's interesting in hindsight, because it is hindsight. Our biggest lessons, in fact, some of the biggest lessons in our life is not from the good times, it's from the challenging times, where we're in the thick of the shit. It's horrible, right? And we don't have to go back there into the emotion of it. But I will draw on what you said in an article in the Sydney Morning Herald. A lot of it is around decision-making, the decisions I either made or didn't make. One of my strengths has always been my relationship with players, and I didn't quite get that right for some reason. I think I did help a lot of the younger players and still have a lot of good relationships with them. I always believed I was a good coach. I feel like I've shown that the majority of my career, but I've also failed, and I've learned a lot from those failures. I made some decisions that I potentially wouldn't make again. So you're owning up to that.
Yeah.
Has that always been part of your nature? Did your dad instill that in you? Is that rocky, mate, don't be a big head, you know, if you make a mistake, tell everyone?
Yeah, well, look, my dad was a very quiet guy, very humble guy, hardworking families, both sides. You know, mum's dad was a train driver. Dad's dad was a guy who was born in Germany, mechanic, come over on a boat, you know, to work on the Snowy Mountain River scheme back in the 50s, and was a miner, you know, so, you know, sort of blue collar background. So I think that was probably, whether it was explicit or implicit, I'm not too sure, but I own my mistakes, and I mean, as I said, I was responsible for the program, and ultimately, you know, leaving 18 months into a 6-year deal, it wasn't going well. So I own that and accept that, but also that's, that doesn't define me, and it doesn't, that's not my identity. And
that would have been a big test.
It was a big test, mate. Really big test. Talk about going through some tough times from a mental point of view. I went through a lot of dark times there, and it really impacted the family. And it was almost to the stage where I didn't want to leave the house. And I said this before, so I'll say this again. Phil Gould rang me, and I don't know Gus that well. He was just sort of checking in with me. As a lot of good people in the game checked in with me, because I think they probably could feel that there was a real barrage of criticism on social media and in the media. And so, he checked in with me and said, have you taken the kids to school? I said, no. You taking your wife for brekkie? And I said, no. And he said, well, pretty much wake up to yourself.
So he just rang you randomly?
He checked on me a couple of times during the year because things were going bad, performance-wise, and then in the media and on social media. Things were turning really, really nasty. And so he checked in with me a couple of times. And because I'd met him for a coffee the year before. I don't know why he checked in, but, maybe he saw a young coach struggling. I don't know, but he checked in. But anyway, long story short, he said, don't hide behind the curtains. He said, tomorrow, go and drop the kids off the school, take your wife for brekkie. He said, you got nothing to be ashamed of. Don't hide behind the curtains. He said, you're a good young coach. He said, this, you'll learn from this and you'll be better for the experience. And I really recalled on that a lot of times because a lot of people said that I wouldn't coach first grade again, I wouldn't be back in the NRL. My reputation and my character had been really smashed. And on social media, it was to the point where myself and Aaron Molan, spoke at the Senate about legislation change. So he's got that heavy, and that's probably something that no other NRL coach has had to endure, to go to those lengths, be talking to the Senate, about legislation change. So, I really admired Gus for that. And I said to him when I next saw him, a year later, I just said, thanks so much for that. You don't understand how important that was. And then Eddie Jones, to his credit, he kept checking in with me and then eventually offered me a job, And so, I'm very grateful that some really, some people that I respected sort of, checked in, or as I said, Eddie didn't need to offer me a job, he could have offered anyone in the world a job. England Rugby is pretty, one of the biggest unions in the world, and every man and their dog would love to be coaching the England team. So I was pretty fortunate, mate. Yeah.
And I can feel the passion as you talk about that. And again, what I love about a podcast, I've worked with you closely for 2.5 years. I'm understanding different things now about what you've gone through. I see you with some of our young players when they're sometimes struggling. You've got a really nice balance of care, but also here's what you need to do. So you don't get, talk about the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is, are you okay? What's up? Empathy is at their level, hey, are you okay? But here's what you need to do. So obviously going through those moments, you don't learn that in a textbook.
No,
so again,
100%.
Overarching, what do you need to do to be a great coach or teacher? Do a bit of study, get your hands on the tools, make some mistakes and some stuff ups, but be humble and learn and lean in. And when you've got great people around you, listen to what they say.
Definitely. I think reps and sets, going back to the language that you use with myself and the coaches and the players, because a lot of young guys who want to be coaches, this is what I probably see at the moment, a lot of people want to go from doing 1 year of coaching, some sort of pathways level or, I suppose, some sort of semi-professional level, want to be a head coach of the NRL side within 12 months. I would encourage people to do an apprenticeship, and you're better off getting there a year or two too late than a year or two too early, because people wouldn't understand. I think Warren Ryan said it best, until your name is in the program as the head coach, you don't understand what a head coach has to go through. And it's a lifestyle. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. I'm in there every Sunday, not all day, but I'm in there every Sunday. And I know that because I get messages from you on a Sunday. Probably drive people mad, but I'm in there on a Sunday. I'm in there on a Saturday, and you've got to try and find a way to relax and enjoy yourself away, which I try and, I feel like I do a decent job balancing that, but it's a lifestyle, right? And so, for younger coaches, I just encourage them, learn your trade, learn from other sports, learn from other coaches, learn from business, and just take your time rather than be in a rush.
I can hear some young coaches listening to this going, come on, Seibs, there's got to be a download, there's an app, there's a hack. Because you look at life now, everything's drop and drag, so you do it overnight. And as you say that, and as we talk, we've lost patience, haven't we? Like, you got to do the apprenticeship, and it's not just the good stuff; it's the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows. So then back to Eddie Jones rings and says, "Hey mate, I'd like you to come over and work with the English Rugby Union team." You're on a plane flying over there. Did you play union growing up in rugby?
Oh, look, I played a little bit, grade 8, grade 9, but rugby league is king in central Queensland, right? So the boarding school I went to was rugby league. First 13 was all you aspired to play for. In Rockhampton, my local club was Rocky Brothers, and I used to watch their A graders play, and that's all I wanted to be. I wanted to be a Rocky Brothers A grader and play for Central Queensland. That was it. And I had no real experience other than doing a lot of shared learning. I'd met a lot of the rugby coaches and done a lot of shared learning with them.
So you landed Heathrow.
Yeah.
Like, Daffy Duck, this symbol when we grow up, looks at the camera and goes, "Mother."
Yeah. Well,
did you have that, like, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah, I did, mate. It was bizarre because it was COVID, right? So I had to apply to get out of the country. So you know how during COVID, there was no international travel, right? The only way you could get out was you apply for an exemption because of work or business, right? So I had to do that. So that was even a process in itself. Then I'm on this flight, right? Business class, England Rugby got a fair bit of money, right? So they've got me up the front end of the plane. But there's no one on these planes, mate, right? I was flying back and forth there for a little while. There's like literally, without exaggerating, there's 6-8 people in the entire plane. There would be one other person in business class, 3 or 4 people in economy. That was it on, the big jets. Yeah. And then you landed in Hong Kong or somewhere halfway.
Well, you can see why Qantas was losing
and there's
hundreds
no one
of millions.
there. There's no one there. It was bizarre. So I land in Heathrow and I'm thinking, shit, now it's real. It's easy to do it over, Zoom or.
Yeah. What's that moment though when you like,
yeah,
geez, I'm about to go to whether it's Twickenham or wherever you were.
Yeah, no, I was then flying on to Jersey because there was going to be a week-long camp with all the test squad and the staff in Jersey. And so I was waiting for a connecting flight. But there was 2 ways. I thought, you know what, I can really lean into this or I can be a bit hesitant. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to lean into this and use some of the senior players to try and create that, that narrative or the buy-in, for want of a better word. I hate that word. But, to use those senior players, show them I can add value. Again, going back to, okay, what can I do? I can add value here. I can add value because I can coach some individuals. I can, I was doing team defence and there's a lot of principles that you can take across. But I was a teacher. And that's what I feel like is my, area of expertise. I could teach and I could get up in front of the room and educate and have a presence and that's what I was able to do with the England team. So so it was a unique experience. Unreal though. Like to coach against the All Blacks or Springboks was it's next level. It was unreal. It was just what I needed. I reckon it was, just exactly what I needed to sort of whet the appetite again to go, you know what, I want to come back and be a head coach again. So I don't think if I did that, I would have come back and taken a head coach role on.
One of my favourite books is Range by David Epstein. In fact, Wiz, I think we need to give David Epstein $20 every time I mention. I just love the summary of his book is Range, the collective sum of experiences you've had has got you exactly where you need to be, and specialisation from an early age is not the best thing. So you've had this range, ups and downs, and then you go to English rugby. I'm going to quote, you said in an interview with Sky Sports, "I love the curious nature of Eddie. It's one of the things that I've certainly taken away from my time with him, that willingness and always want to get better. Some people call it a growth mindset, but it's just about being curious and wanting to get better as a coach. I see Eddie as someone who I've counted as a mentor before I even came into the environment. When I was coaching last as a head coach in the NRL through good years and challenging seasons, he's always been someone I've constantly spoken to about coaching and the challenges that come with that. I consider him to be a master coach, an elite coach, and I'm certainly a much better coach for having spent time in his program."
Yeah.
Yeah, what a great opportunity.
Yeah, no, I would repeat the same thing. Eddie gets, a bit of a bad rap at times for whatever reason, but he's one of the most experienced coaches in world sport at international level.
I don't know what happened. There's some varying reports in the media. I just think he had a bit of a shocker when he came back to the Wallabies this last World Cup.
It's probably like me at the Broncos, right? I went really young, really, really young with the Broncos. Made a Pat Carrigan captain, maybe at 20 or something like that. Without knowing what happened with the Wallabies, Eddie went very young, and so potentially, that might have had an impact on their performance at the World Cup. But I just know, having been in his environment, he's very demanding, but that's okay because you want your head coach to delegate, and he would delegate exceptionally well, and then he'd be very demanding. But I didn't see that as a negative. I saw that as, right, he's going to hold me accountable and I'm responsible for this area. So I would really go after it. Yeah, I improved as a coach under his, under his head coaching. There's no doubt about that. And I improved as a head coach with the England players. Like, they were really good. They were a great group of guys to work with, and I enjoyed my time there. And the way that they went after everything that I tried to install or implement with them was just was unreal. So it was a great coaching experience, and I felt ready to come back to the NRL.
Did Eddie also do education? Did he have a teaching
degree? He did,
degree?
mate, yeah.
So when I look at that, you've got a teaching degree. Eddie has Joe Schmidt, current coach at the Wallabies. I think Steve Hansen did Clive Woodward. So I read a rugby.com article recently that said basically if you want to win a Rugby World Cup, go get a Bachelor of Education.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So how much of a difference?
Well, I think I'm not sure if there's too many teachers in the NRL anymore. We've certainly got a couple of teachers on our staff, as you know. Stephen Hales, Steve Murphy's an ex-teacher, Stephen Hales, an ex-teacher, Guy Williams, ex-teacher, and then obviously myself. So we've got 4. But there would be some at other clubs. Someone like a Frank Panisi, down at Melbourne Storm, although he's a GM, he's got an education background and so on. So there's a lot of people. I think Brian Smith, who was a legendary coach, Roy Masters, even Wayne Bennett was an instructor at the Police Academy. So essentially, I think from what I understand, teaching phys ed there.
I can't say Police Academy without thinking of Hightower.
Yeah. So I think, a lot of people, I think it's of benefit. Like, I would encourage any aspirational coach to do, even if they just do it like a 12-month, teaching sort of add on to whatever study they've done in the past. I think they'd get a heap out of it, because it's around learning intentions, checking for understanding, retrieval, all those different types of things are really important. So, but Eddie had a background, and he used to bring in. Talk about a master teacher. He used to bring in a guy called Doug Lemov.
I think you've just read my notes, because I wanted to really double click on Doug Lemov, because I've heard you talk about him. I've ordered his book, and when I read that, I just saw some of the variations on teaching principles that I now do through some of the learning on Doug Lemov. So the bouncing ball.
Doug's considered to be one of the world's best teachers, one of the world's leading teachers. He's based out of New Jersey. He's got a number of books. So if you Google Doug Lemov, Lemov, but essentially for coaches, he's got a great book. Essentially, transfer of teaching into coaching and how you can do it. So again, the name of the book escapes me, but if you Google Doug Lemov, you'll find the book. But he would come in for a week at a time.
Powerful Teaching, Unleash the Science of Learning. Yeah. That's the book that I've got of his.
Right, okay. And there's another one, effective teaching. I think it might be effective teaching strategies.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, effective teaching strategies for coaching or something like that. But anyway, he would come in and critique us on our teaching, like our presenting skills, our use of questioning, our retrieval, linking meetings.
So critique meaning you'd run a session, he'd be standing there watching, and then he'd pull you aside after.
Yeah, and they'd often sometimes film it and go, hey, Seibs, look at your body language there. How you open yourself up, that's great, mate. Versus folding your arms and just really, really high level stuff. But Eddie did that because he wanted us to be the best teachers. So could we get a competitive advantage? Yeah, we could, because if we had the best team meetings, that was the idea behind it. So Doug would come across. And so there's so many good things that I've kept that Doug either reminded me of from my own teaching background or I've added. And one of the things, people listening that might be from the business world, so think about meetings that they have, right? So sometimes people don't feel safe enough to talk up in a meeting, right? Because they think, oh shit, I might get the answer wrong in front of the boss. So one really simple, safe way of checking for understanding is turn and talk. And so when I came into the Manly group, they were quite awkward about answering questions, and they felt a bit nervous about getting something wrong. So really simply turn and talk. Okay, you've got 60 seconds. What am I showing? What am I saying? Or what do you think? I want you to look at here on this video clip. Show the video clip. Show it again. Show it twice. Okay, turn and talk 60 seconds. What are we looking at here? And so if they got it wrong, they got it wrong in a safe space because it's with their mate. So just something as simple as that in a business meeting. Turn and talk. 2 minutes. And then we've got any questions, ask your partner if you've got a question about what I've just presented there. What's Seibs talking about here, or what's Maisie talking, so you can do it in a safe space. That's just one example of creating psychological safety in meetings, like a turn and talk or get in threes, so just little simple activities like that. But he sort of helped us sort of shape up what works for each of the coaches.
I smile as you say that, because my strength that I've trained is keynotes. So keynote, you're at stage, not really talking at, but it's not two-way dialogue. It's more, here's a story, all right, quick turn to the person next to you, bang music and go. So it's high energy. I've learned a lot through the Seagulls, on the difference between presenting at a high level and then just more that level coaching and turning and talking. It's made a huge difference. To the point, Angela Poon, who I work with at Performance Intelligence, we launched an executive performance program 2 weeks ago, and we did a debrief at the end, and I said to Angela, what worked, what didn't work, what can we improve? And she said, what worked? She said, you're teaching differently. I said, how's that? She said, what you're now doing is showing the info and saying, all right, now turn and talk, or just giving people a drop in intensity. So I want to thank you. I've built that into my business. It's made a massive difference. Again, at a keynote, you still need to ramp it up.
Of course,
depending on the stage.
And you do a great job of that. I've listened to you do the
That's
keynotes.
jazz hands, right?
Yeah.
you do a great job of that. Yeah. But that teaching at a different level, I've loved that learning. And you, similar to Doug Lemov, like you'll give me feedback. And there was a session last year, and I knew I didn't land it. I think it was something we're getting ready to go away. That was when we had a bit on the road, and you came up and said to me after, mate, how do you think that went? I said, I don't think I landed the message. So, and I appreciate that. And I think sometimes people in the corporate world go, that sounds ruthless. No, we have psychological safety. Yeah. If I do a good job, you'll tell me, but there's a couple of times where it hasn't landed. I'd much rather you tell me that. But to have that psychological safety, that's paramount.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, first of all, I feel safe enough to be able to give you that feedback, whether it's positive feedback or, hey, Maisie, think about this next time. And it comes from a place of care, because I want you to be the best presenter or the best teacher, because I'm always thinking about what's world-class look like. I want you to be the best version of yourself, and what's world-class look like for you. And so that's why I would give you feedback. It's like a player. Like, I give them feedback because I care, and I want them to either reinforce their behaviours or to try and improve their behaviours. That's why you give feedback. So feedback for me is not a dangerous place to be in. I think it's a really constructive place to be in. But you need to do it in the right manner and critique the performance. I was always taught, not the person. And so that's something that's really stuck with me. And I think when we're trying to embed the learning with the players, and that's why I sort of gave you feedback, you need to get, it's not what you know, it's what they learn from the session, and then how do you link that to the next session and so on. So it's really interesting. I love that part of coaching and teaching, because I think it's an area that we can get a competitive advantage. And I don't like long meetings, as you know. We're not in there for a long time. So go in there with some really specific learning intentions, like what's the one or two things I want the players or the staff, if it's a staff meeting, to take away from this particular meeting. How do we have a fast start to the meeting? So do we have a primer to get them laughing? Do we have a primer to get their emotions a bit high? So I always think about a primer. Then, okay, how do we embed the one or two, learning intentions? And then how do we check for understanding? So checking for understanding can be the use of questioning. It could be writing down. We give them a book, and it's up to them whether they want to write in it or not. If they don't write in it, I've got no dramas with that. They own their career. But I don't give them tip sheets, because that's spoon-feeding the players, and they don't read the tip sheets anyway, because it's too much information if you do give them. But you might check for understanding. Write down the 2 or 3 key takeaways for you from this session, or turn and talk and tell your mate your one key takeaway.
So the Mind You Buddy this week, I gave those little cards.
It was awesome,
which was your advice.
Yeah.
Reading that was so powerful, because we had 3 groups. Let's say with coaches, we would have had 45, maybe 50 people go through. Some of the insights on that were like, oh, wow. Like there was a real range, and some of it wasn't even on what we were talking about this week, which was on imagery. Some of it was on self-talk, which was the recall at the start.
Yes, right, which you're doing really well. So for the listeners out there, what I've sort of been working on with the coaches and Maisie is how you link one meeting to the next. So if you deliver a particular topic last week or the last meeting, that's what you retrieve to start the next meeting. So you're linking meeting to meeting, or you're linking the meeting to the field session and so on. But then how do you check for understanding? I said to Maisie, you don't mind me sharing this story, do you?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I said to Maisie, why don't you, check for understanding, or see, if your message is landed by getting the players to, just sort of like a post-it note.
Well, let's go full context, because it's a raw, open podcast. I'd done a session on energy management and sleep, and I'd worked with JC and put it together. And I got a bit excited, and the session went for 45 or 50 minutes. And you said to me, mate, at the end, look, a good content, but I was falling asleep. And I'm like, that wasn't the intent. And you gave me the feedback, and I said, mate, thank you. And I walked away and thought, I've been presenting for 20 plus years. You never stop learning. And having that feedback I love, because you're learning and growing and developing. And then you said that you write the cards.
So the idea is if you try and chase 5 rabbits, you get none, right? So just imagine letting 5 rabbits out in the backyard and you try and collect all 5, you're not. But if you're really deliberate and you go after 1 rabbit or 2 rabbits, you're probably going to get them. Okay, so it's the same with teaching. And so, what we were talking about on this particular occasion this week was it's really good to check for understanding. What are the 2 key points that the players are taking away from this particular mental skills meeting that you're running? And so then if there's 40 different takeaways, then you've probably had too much messaging, or your meeting was too long. But if there's pretty much like for 70% of the group, if they're sort of somewhere in and around, the same 2 takeaways, then you've landed your meeting. And it's a really good way to check for understanding, but it's something that is really important because if you think, think of your kids, you tell them not to touch the TV or, don't go into the food cabinet or whatever it is. I don't know. But if you think you tell them once and they do it, then we're dreaming, aren't we? Because they don't. You've got to keep reminding them. And so that's the idea of retrieval. And so, the opposite of learning is forgetting. And Doug Lemov used to talk about that a lot. So that's why linking meetings, retrieving, checking for understanding, being really clear, what's your 1 or 2 learning intentions for this meeting? It's the same when we game plan. We don't give the players 1,000 things to go after because that's chasing 5 rabbits. We give them 3 things, and we really narrow our focus to 3 things for the particular week. If we're playing Roosters or Storm, whoever we're playing, these are the 3 big rocks that we're really going to go after this week. And then that should be embedded and retrieved over the whole week. And that's how we like to coach. And there's more than one way to skin a cat, Maisie. But that's the way that, that we sort of shaped our program and that I've sort of learnt and developed over a long period of time.
You're starting to flex some of this. You're starting to teach some of this to corporate groups. And I've got someone you've worked with, which I'll give you a quote in a moment of a talk you did recently. But let's just zoom out for a while because we've been talking about NRL and teaching and everything else. Our audience is a combination of sport and high performers, defence, government, and we've got a lot of corporate audience. So for any of those groups, I want them to think about their operating rhythm. What is it like when you start on a Monday? Do you have a primer? What are your meetings like? You know what most meetings are in the corporate world, Seibs? We got a 9 to 10 o'clock. Hey, mate, can I meet you at 11 to 12? We make 1 hour appointments. Why? Because Microsoft Outlook, when Gates invented it, had 1 hour appointments. There's no thought on training or transfer and learning. Hey, turn to the person. It's just slide. I used to work for a consulting firm, and my God, it was just punishing. That was all this time was spent on the decks, and there's not much on retention. Now, not everyone, but just a lot of people got stuck on the same game. Just we've got back-to-back meetings. It's a slide deck. So if we zoom out, if you go in, you're working with a corporate group, what would you say to them? How to just shake it up to get more learning and retention and more spark, more fun?
Yeah, well, I would always have a primer. And so a primer could be a little video, it could be music as they come into the meeting. It could be as simple as that. Some of our meetings, the primer is music, and you'll have someone's photo up on the screen. Music today by Maisie, and like it's some R&B from late 80s, early 90s.
I was Gloria Gaynor
or something like that. But like so you can do it. You can do whatever you like. But think about a primer, because there's a fair bit of research around. Having a primer to either engage someone, make them laugh, make them smile, feel good if it's music, about then their learning or their interaction is of a higher degree. So there's a fair bit of research in that. But I'd have a primer. I'd have 2 or 3 things, so this is the, so in corporate world, it might be, these are the 2 or 3 outcomes from the meeting that want us to walk away and have done. So everyone's really clear, you're really explicit on the 2 or 3 takeaways from the meeting. I would definitely have turn and talk in any of my meetings, and certainly when I've run some stuff with corporates in the past, like, turn and talk. Okay, I've been talking for a little bit here now. Turn and talk. What's the 1 or 2 key things that you're going to take away right now? And sort of, start to embed in your environment as an example. But yeah, like I would run meetings like I run the staff meetings at our club, or how I run our footy meetings with the players. And so I think there's some really valuable lessons. I think for managers, it'd be really interesting to do the little post-it note or the palm card. hey guys, what's the 2 key takeaways? Write it down on the post-it note, leave it where you sat. And for the manager to come around and collect it, say there's 12 people or 15 people in the meeting, it'd be really interesting to see what the 2 takeaways were, because if they're varied and they're different to what the manager had in his head at the start of the meeting, then he hasn't done a good job to land it with the staff. So yeah, some simple things like that, mate.
So I love this. You love this. There will be some people listening to this going, "Oh my God, I would hate to work with those guys. That is so confronting." Because I'm going to be shown up, or people are going to show my weaknesses. How would you coach someone around that mindset, especially in the corporate world? Because sport, we just get used to it, and some of the experience you're saying is it really has transference in sport to the corporate world and also to defence. But if people are just so foreign to this type of thinking, how do you dip your toe in?
Well, I think, again, how do you create a safe environment? How do you create a safe meeting? All right. So I think one of the ways to do it would be, during the meeting, just turn and talk. You don't have to write it down, because that might be a bit confronting, but, you're happy to turn and talk to your mate who you work in the cubicle or the aisle beside you. You know what I mean? You turn and talk. You've got 2 minutes. What's one takeaway from the start of this meeting? From the first 10 minutes of this meeting, they have a discussion. You'll hear the volume in the room go up. Okay, all right, okay, all right. The next point we want to get to is this. So then you don't even have to get them to say it out loud, because they've had a discussion in their pairs. Little things like that, mate, I think are really important. But if you don't want to waste your hour, or you don't want to waste your half hour, then you need to be thinking about some of this stuff, because, again, I talk about embedding and learning and takeaways and so on. How do you know what the person's taken from the meeting? Unless you check for understanding. How do you know that it's going to be action unless you retrieve it the next time you catch up? So that's what I would sort of suggest people have a look at doing. And I can understand it might be a bit confronting, but that's why I went down the route of turn and talk, or groups of 3, smaller groups, because what you'll find is there's a bit of the power of 4. The number 4 is quite a really interesting number. So don't go bigger than groups of 4 when you're really trying to get people to talk up and to speak. If you get groups of 6, there'll be 2 people who sort of hide away and don't have to engage in a conversation. So pairs, 3s, 4s at most, when you want to try and get some conversation going and create a bit of psychological safety, that's, they're the numbers you're looking at, I think.
Another question I've got, and I've never asked you this, there may not be anything, so I'm curious in the answer. Do you consciously do anything for memory recall? And memory recall, writing down, or is it physical? Now, we know the research on especially aerobic exercise with BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic growth factor. Big words, but physical activity we know helps you with memory recall. What tactics, what tricks, even some of the lifestyle strategies do you do to help your brain function? Because just closing out, you got a bloody good recall. Like you talk about 1989, this happened back then. Is that with everything with you?
Well, yeah.
It's almost Rain Man.
Most things. But my girls would tell you that I have a bad memory. Like we were playing a board game last night, and you had all these objects on your sheet of paper, and then it spits out 2 objects. I can't think of the name of it, but it spits out 2 objects. And if you've got that on your piece of paper, you call out like, cat or drum or clock.
Reece, do you know the game?
I don't know the game. The girls were playing last night. Anyway, I was hopeless at it, and they were giving it to me big time. They're going, now you've got a 5 in front of you, 5 at the front of your age, you're struggling. But I do have decent recall. One of the things that I've done is I'm a big note taker. So even if we have a conversation, myself and you, I'll go away and write down the 2 or 3 key points that I need to recall or remember from the conversation. I won't write down 10 things from it.
You do that with personal development, like you've recently been to New Zealand to go and spend time with the Crusaders. You've done this with multiple teams, and you've given me a summary, and it's great learning for everybody.
Yeah, so writing notes. Like there's a fair bit of research around note taking. So that's why I don't give sheets of paper to the players. We don't give them tip sheets. We give them a notebook, and it's up to them to write down what they want. Now, some of the players won't write down anything. That's okay, because that's their choice, because they own their career. But the reason why I don't give them big sheets of paper with a heap of writing on is because for most of them, they see so much writing, they're not even going to start reading it. But if you said, okay, write down the 1 or 2 key things from this meeting that's important for you to do your job, then, Luke Brooks or Daly Cherry Evans or Tom Trebojevic are going to write down those 2 things that are just important to them, not important to, the other player who's sitting, 3 or 4 seats away. So, yeah, I do a lot of note taking, not thousands of notes, just like what are the couple of the key takeaways. So I'm really big on that, and that's helped me with recall. The other thing is I link music to memories. So that's something that I do think I'm a bit Rain Man-ish with.
So give me more info on that.
Well, so I can recall, so my wife will say this, right? I can't remember what happened yesterday, but I can recall back in 1993, a particular game, because at that time that song was number 1 or it was on Rage or whatever else. It's quite uncanny, that sort of stuff. But that's one way I do recall past events. But the biggest one for me, like in a learning context, is the note taking. What's a couple of things, and there's a fair bit of research around actually writing it down helps to embed that into your memory. But you've got to retrieve it. You have to retrieve it. So that's the big things: writing down, retrieving, and then over a couple of beers, if a song comes on, I'll be able to tell you who were the premiers that particular year and so on. Yeah, stuff like that.
Trivia for future.
Yeah, that's right.
You went deep on this in the Moonshot podcast, so we won't go deep, but just a high level for people. The focus on your physical and psychological well-being, you've added a lot as well. So just a couple of things you do to control state, especially down regulation.
Yeah, well, you've helped me enormously with this, Maisie, I've got to say. I wish I sort of had somebody like you to work with when I was at Broncos, because that's probably when I needed this stuff. But yeah, so what I do to down-regulate, and not everyone's lucky enough to be able to do this, but I put a sauna in at home. And so I've got a really short drive from work to home. It's about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Now, if I had a longer drive, I probably don't need to do anything other than drive home and either you listen to a bit of music or actually just drive in silence. And that sort of down-regulates from being a head coach to being a dad. And so because I live so close to work, I use a sauna. So before I go upstairs, it's the first thing that I do. 10, 12 minutes in the sauna, mixed with a cold shower. And then when I go upstairs, I'm dad. And I feel like that really helps me transfer from, what is in some regards like a pretty full-on job.
Because when you go home, like all respect, your family doesn't give a shit.
No, they don't.
There's an org chart. You're the bottom of it under the dog.
Well, and that's the thing. And that's the thing. It's down-regulate from being a head coach, where you're actually making a lot of decisions and you're actually telling people what to do in a lot of ways.
And you have a lot of agency.
Yeah, exactly. And so come home, that's one way to down-regulate. The other thing is I've added is some breathing. So the box breathing really works for me. So, the 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, and then 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds, or the 4 seconds in, and then 8 seconds out through the mouth. So the stuff.
Good student.
So the stuff that you've been working on with myself and the other the players and stuff. The use of a journal, and I spoke about this to a group this morning. Just really simple, and I don't do it every single day. I do it 2 or 3 times a week, whereby I write down one thing I'm grateful for, how I'm feeling, and if I'm feeling shit and I'm having a bad day, I'm really brutal. But I write down, I'm feeling shit today. I can't get this negative thought out of my head, or if I'm feeling up about great today, like ready to write. So I'm really, I suppose, transparent with my feelings. Then one thing I've learnt for the day, and then what's the 2 or 3 things I have to do the rest of the day or tomorrow, depending on when I journal.
What I like with you sharing that, and when you coach someone, I'll never share stuff that we do on the podcast, but I like you sharing that with the audience. Because you have some people think Anthony Seibold is his coach, he's just signed another deal and Manly on the up, and he's normal. You mean he has negative thoughts? You mean he sometimes has doubt and is not sure he's doing the right thing and has shitty days? Absolutely, we all do.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that I've been working with you on. So they're the big rocks for me at the moment, and then trying to have a regular exercise program, which I've probably trained like a player, particularly in the gym for the last 20-something years. But again, one of your regular people you have on, Dr. Tom Buckley. He is someone that, I've had a couple of conversations with and what can I sort of do or change now that I'm 50, because what I need to do now is a bit different to when I was 30, So they're all things, all things that I'm sort of trying to be better with and learn from. And, the wearable, tech with Garmin, to track my heart rate variability overnight. And I see a massive difference if I ever have a couple of beers versus when I don't.
Is it depressing what it does to your HRV?
It's crazy. Honestly, like HRV, like normally I'm around 60 to 70, Which is good, right? If I have a couple of beers, even if it's like 3 or 4 beers, I've noticed it goes down like 22, 18. I'm just thinking, wow.
And that's when you feel irritable and you fuse like is ready to light and you just feel scratchy.
Yeah. So even tracking my steps, So there's a few things. There's not 1,000 things. I've probably tried to really add 4 things, which is, get Dr. Tom to help me with, some of the exercise and activity I need to be doing as a 50-year-old, how I down-reg so I can turn from head coach to dad, and then the journaling, which is just a good outlet for me. And then, as I said, the breathing's really a good one for me. And I try and combine that often with the sauna, so it's something you can combine the two.
Double dipping. Now, 2 people I spoke to in research, especially when we're building a high-performance culture, one is JC. And I said, what have you learnt from Seibs, both here at Seagulls and in England? And he starts everything, g'day, pal. G'day, pal. It's detail, organisation, communication skills. They're a real differentiator. Short and sharp with JC. And then Matt Common, Matt came and did a day with Manly Seagulls.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Freaking loved it.
Yeah, he's awesome, mate. I've got so much respect. I learned a lot from him.
Well, there's a bromance. I feel like the matchmaker. You and Matt have been set up. And then Matt came to a game against the Roosters. We beat the Roosters, which was his team. He said to me this morning, do you now realise all of his executive team is on the Manly Seagulls bandwagon? Good. He said, Maisie, you're doing more for recruiting than you realise.
That's good.
Now, you went and spoke at Matt's leadership team offsite a couple of weeks ago. So I caught up with Matt this morning at Bondi Beach and I told him we were chatting and I said, what can I play on Seibs? He said, oh, absolutely. He just teed off. Quote, a few of my leadership team were really sceptical when I invited Seibs into a leadership forum. You know why they're sceptical? Because a lot of them think, totally disproven that today, but they'll often think dumb jock. He's just a footballer, he's just an athlete. At the end of the day, I had so much positive feedback. In fact, one of my staff asked me, have you ever held a forum, Matt, as CEO when employees were asking for a photo with one of your guests and totally forgot about you? and Matt said that laughing, but he just said you had such an impact that even that night with a few of the people who were sceptical, they said, that was really impressive. What was impressive? Your connection and teamwork. Almost military-like process towards getting the best out of people. No ego, authentic about mistakes, and even calling your Brisbane experience a failure that you learn from. Great shares and learning framework. So it's a real summary of everything we've spoken about today.
Yeah, I was pleased to hear that. But yeah, as I said, being a CEO of something like the Commonwealth Bank where there's like thousands of employees, and the way that Matt carries himself was really impressive, and he almost like treats himself as a high performer, doesn't he?
Oh, can I correct you? Not almost. He treats himself as an absolute corporate athlete.
Yeah. So
and we've got a whole podcast.
Yeah, you worded it better than me, but that's the thing that I noticed, and that's helped me think about, well, what can I be doing better to act and feel, and and be a bit more like that. So that's pleasing to hear that there was some sort of impact made. Yeah.
I wouldn't read out. Matt said, look, there are a lot of footy analogies. It didn't really have much crossover.
Yeah.
But what I liked on that, and I think what you saw as well going into that environment, all this stuff works in an NRL team. Hey, this has worked in a rugby union environment. This has got real transference into the corporate world. So if we now pull all those threads together, young Seibs, when he's out there with the big haircut and looking like Ellery Hanley, I'm still laughing at that. The flat top, that would have been Top Gun, right?
Top Gun and Ivan Drago from Rocky.
Rocky 4. Love it.
Yeah.
Then as a good athlete, not great, self-limiting beliefs, being told by a couple of mentors, go study, go get education. Then when you got the education, let's put you in front of the teachers. Geez, learning fast track, fast fueled. Then meeting Galen Clues and then learning about this going, why didn't I have this years ago? But that was my competitive advantage. Go over and you play Super Rugby, throw that out. Then in hindsight, why did I throw that out? That was the thing that gave me the advantage. And then wrapping all these up doing an understudy underneath Bellamy, having that experience, working with the Queensland State of Origin, then going to the Rabbitohs, Dally M Coach of the Year, being pulled across to Broncos and having a pretty shitty experience, really struggling. I appreciate you being open about that and authentic, mate. Then getting on a plane in COVID with 6 other people, flying over to Heathrow going, what the hell have I done?
That's right.
Going to Jersey and then realising, actually, no, it doesn't matter that I don't know a lot about rugby union. I'm a coach and I'm an educator. And then meeting Doug Lemov and putting these frameworks, learning from Eddie, and then come back together at Manly Seagulls. And then I say, how do you build a world-class team? It's all that stitched together, isn't it? And then now you've got the canvas to really get in there and have a crack with Manly.
Yeah, and that's what I really enjoy at the moment. And yeah, that's the opportunity that's in front of us. Like the opportunity is to take the club, the team to the next level. But we've got to work hard and we've got to be, smart about what we do. And but that's what I love about being a head coach. You've got the opportunity to help people, achieve what they've dreamt of for a long time. And that's ultimately what I see my sort of vision for why I do what I do.
And it's hard. Like a lot of people, if they've got any thoughts, just being a head coach is easy. You work long hours. I've mentioned before, you're in the public spotlight. We've done this multiple times. We go for a walk at Manly. Hey, Seibold, mate, why are you picking this player for? Like people just yell out at you. I work with a lot of people in business and defence. No one will go, hey, why did you buy those submarines, you idiot? Like for whatever reason, well, because people feel connected to it.
That's
too.
right. Yeah.
That's what club marketing agencies do. Yeah. But they feel that they can see you on Manly Promenade and actually give you good, bad, or indifferent feedback. It's hilarious, like on the outside watching that. But at times you must feel like, mate, what if I came into your house and said, geez, you're a shit dad?
I was thinking about that. Like, look, the bulk of what people yell is really positive.
Yes.
And then you get negative. But I was thinking, imagine if you went into a restaurant or you sung out to the chef, that was shit.
This lobster's bloody awful.
But it's quite endearing. But that's one of the things that I love about being a head coach. People are so passionate. People care about their team. Like I really do. I'm really proud to represent the community that I live in. And because I lived there even before I was the head coach of the team, so I know how passionate the area is around the Seagulls. And so, I'm only a guardian of this team for however long it is, and I want to hand over the team to whoever comes next in really good shape, having done the community proud, whether they live on the Northern Beaches or whether they're a Manly, supporter or a Manly member, Australia or New Zealand wide. So that's sort of why I don't mind, people singing out and stuff like that, because it just shows how passionate they are. And then that gets you thinking, what, there's a fair bit of meaning to this. I want to get up and I want to work hard for the group, and because I want them to achieve their dreams, and I want to work hard to try and inspire, the Manly, supporters and the next generation of Manly players.
That's Mike. I remember that guy that did yell us. This was last year, about midway through the season. He's yelling at you, Seibold, what are you doing with your selections? I think he called you a clown. He was wearing Tigers shorts.
Yeah.
He's at Manly Beach wearing Tiger shorts and then giving you feedback.
Yeah, but again, as I said, most people are really, really good, and I've been, quite fortunate with the support I've had.
NRL's tough. They say it's one of the toughest, or a lot of people believe it is the toughest sport in the world as far as physical contact. Also, when you look at the playing schedule, the rugby union boys just go, I don't believe you do it. Like 24 games in 27 weeks.
Well, same with the AFL guys. I think they think the same. Like it's quite a demanding schedule, and you add State of Origin for 3 or 4 of our players into that mix as well.
And then you throw international rugby. So we've got boys who aren't even back yet because they've been playing the international rugby.
Yeah, and it's pretty full on. Yeah.
So to win a premiership, like a lot's got to go your way, and you've got to do a lot of preparation. You've shared so much today. Is there 1 or 2 other areas, not just sport related, but if I asked you, what do you do to build a world-class team? What's 1 or 2 things we maybe haven't spoken about?
Well, first of all, I think for me it's about reverse engineering. Okay, so like what's the, what are we working towards, and then work back from that. And so when we work back from that, how can I fill the gaps in and around me? So you talk about world-class team. We've gone to other sports. We've gone and got a strength and power coach from the All Black Sevens. We've gone and got an analyst from England Rugby. We've gone and got a high performance or head of performance from England Rugby. I've gone and got a teacher who has worked in the NRL for 18 years to come in and work with our younger players and Steve Murphy. So that's how you try and build a world-class staff to run a world-class program. And then you got to really try and work out what's our weapons. Like what are our weapons? Because I really admire Penrith, winning the premiership 4 years in a row. It's unheard of, in a salary cap sport. And they've got some fantastic competitive advantages, but what's ours? Because if we just try and copy their competitive advantage, we're going to be, a poor, sort of cousin of what they do. And it's the same with the Melbourne Storm, who have had sustained success for so long. So what's our weapons? What competitive advantage can we develop, and then what's that look like? So that's what I'm always thinking about with regards to, putting together a world-class program. And that's the opportunity that we've got, continue to do that and bringing people like yourself in, to work with the players, who now the players really know and trust, don't they? So, and that takes time, doesn't it? Like we're in year three of you working with the guys.
We spoke, it takes 3 years to embed a program. So I think I said to you recently, regardless of whatever happens at the end of the year, mate, it's our fault. Because when you go into a new team, this is more from a consulting background. The first year you inherit and you're picking up rocks and going, geez, what's here? Second year, you start to make an impact. You get your men and women in around you. Third year, that end of the third year, it's really got your DNA, your fingerprints all over it.
That's right. And so we want to continue to grow the program because we want the players to feel like they're part of something that, is building and something that's really special. So, that's the opportunity we got.
I think one of the learnings on that, just go back to that first point, this is maybe an N=1, but when I was young in my corporate career, and because I sold a couple of businesses, one to Accor Hotel Group. Hotel's pretty ruthless. You climb your way up almost by trampling on other people. Consulting can be pretty ruthless. It's almost like a combat sport at times as well. So incorrectly, I think people are taught you get ahead by keeping your cards close to your chest and not really sharing and educating and teaching others. Your approach is totally different. The German word, you've got a German heritage, Schadenfreude, have I pronounced that right? Or Schadenfreude, is pleasure through other people's misery. But Mitfreude is pleasure through other people's success. You've got a massive dose of Mitfreude. Some people don't. They find that challenging to put people around them. I thought it was a really big move. It said a lot about your personality, and I liked it, and it was great. But you put Shane Flanagan in, who'd been an NRL coach, and had success. You're back in the fold. I don't think a lot of coaches would have done that because they may have been worried that Flano knows more. But that mindset around that of putting people around you who you see have strengths in other areas, have you always had that?
I think it's developed over time, but if I talk specifically around Shane Flanagan, who some people may have heard of, he coached Cronulla to the 2016 premiership. There was a little bit of redemption for giving him an opportunity. Like Flano had, wasn't allowed to be a head coach for a couple of years, and so without going into detail around, the reasons why, I thought, people tell me he's a great coach and good man manager. So why wouldn't I give him that opportunity to come back and coach? He's got great experience. I thought we'd be stronger by having him beside me. And we had a really good season. It was a 50% season, but just having someone experienced, I could run ideas past Flano, and he's been through a whole heap of things. So there was one, giving him an opportunity to get back coaching because for whatever reason he hadn't been coaching for a couple of years, and then the second one was I thought he could add value to us, and if you can add value to our program, then I want you part of the program.
But you were even really positive when he got the job at the Dragons. Mate, go for it.
Yeah, I was wrapped because he aspired to be a head coach again, and I gave him an opportunity. So I'm not saying he got the job because of me in any way, shape or form. He got it because of he's a really good coach. But being strong enough to say, hey, Flano, come and work for us for 12 months or 24 months, and then hopefully that opens up an avenue for you to be a head coach. I felt really pleased and proud of that. And he's doing a great job with the Dragons. So
we don't want him to do a great job when we play them this year.
No. It was one all last year. They actually played really well against us in Wollongong. But so things like that is good. It's good to see people succeed and
it's genuine.
Yeah.
Like with you, it is genuine.
Yeah.
Like even for me, you've opened up opportunities. Like I'm working in rugby because of you, because we had a couple of coaches from the Waratahs sit in a mind gym and they said, Maisie, can we have a chat? And
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot today. We've done the Anthony Seibold chronology from the young punk to now the still young, fit, vibrant. I'm going to get you to 100.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Not even halfway there, Seibs. What were your reflections on our discussion today or in thinking about this discussion?
Yeah, well, I think one is how I can perform better myself, so thinking about how you're down reg, so if you've got a stressful job in corporate life, how do you not take that home to the family? look after yourself first. So I've certainly focused more in and around that space, tracking my sleeping, HRV, all that sort of stuff. So
the game, when we first gave you the heart rate monitor, was it the Roosters
it was
game?
No Cowboys game. It was a Golden Point
and
game.
You sent me the data. I'm like,
it started buzzing, the alarm started ringing at the start of Golden Point, and all the coaches were looking around. I looked at my watch because I literally had it about 3 days, and it was going through the roof. My heart rate obviously really skyrocketed.
So just for context, the alarm you can set a buzz. Like if you're worried about people with cardiac arrest, you set the alarm so your heart's going.
Yeah, but what I did was I didn't know what was going on. I'm going, did I have an alarm? Why would I set the alarm during the game? I've looked at it and it's gone abnormal heart rate. Well, that made me even get more panic because I'm going, shit, I might have a heart attack here. So anyway, but doing that. Just looking after yourself a bit better. But then thinking about if you're in the corporate space, what do you want to get out of a meeting? Like, don't just have a meeting for the meeting's sake.
That's
right?
a huge one.
What's the 2 or 3, intentions out of this meeting? How can you create psychological safety? How can you retrieve information or check for understanding? Because a lot of meetings I've seen in the corporate space, there's a whole heap of information delivered, go away and action it, and you don't even know whether, Maisie's, understood what his role or the messaging was. So they're probably the 2 or 3 main things, mate, that I'd like people to walk away with.
Let's finish with the flip. The flip is, in thinking about today, is there a question you thought I'd ask you that I haven't? Or flip, is there a question you want to ask me?
Yeah, I want to ask you this. So
now I get nervous, mate. Yeah. You got that cheeky smile on your face.
No,
we're out, mate. We're out of here.
No, I won't be a smart aleck. And so what I want to ask you, and you've alluded to this a little bit with me, but haven't really gone into detail about it. You said that you were really a high performer at the sort of more, not important meets. And so what would you tell yourself if you had the opportunity of Andrew May now, with all your experiences and you worked across multiple sports, corporate level, what would you tell yourself to take the minor meet performances to the major meet performances?
Yeah, I'm going to try and give this in a bullet point answer. We could do a whole podcast on this. Good question, Seibs. One was identity. Inextricably, I linked my role identity with my personal identity or my purpose. So I thought I perform, therefore I am. I didn't realise there was a difference between the performer and the person. So I put so much pressure on myself back then. I wanted to represent Australia. And I think so much of it was done external. Like, what did I really want? Did I want to represent Australia for me, or was it to impress others? So that's one thing, is actually look at what's the true essence of why I'm doing this. Like you, I was good as a young fella, won multiple state championships, so running just chose me. But I don't think I ever had anyone like me. Do you sound like a wanker saying, I wish I had me, or I wish I had a Michael Gervais? I've got an intellectual crush for Michael. To actually teach me at that young age, you're a performer, but you're also a person. That's the big one. Secondary to that would be skills around pre-performance routines. I didn't have a routine. Like the night before, I do different stuff. So I couldn't tell you what I did the night before to get the good performance. Some days I'd watch a movie. Some days I'd had a girlfriend with sex. Some days no sex. Yeah. I didn't, more days back then the way I looked, it was probably no sex. I had a hoop earring and big hair, so it was a good look, mate. And then I didn't have a routine before the race. And then similar to what you said, crippling self-doubt at times. Like, what if I don't feel fresh on the third lap, which is the big lap in the 1500 where you either make it or blow up. I used to talk myself down in big meets rather than going in there going, we talk about the FOP, all those skills you train in a non-pressurized environment to pull out when you need them. I would have loved to have been doing a warm-up and had the negative thoughts and gone, this is normal. The brain's default is we go to survival. I had none of that. Back then, sports psychology, and any times we'd go to AIS, it was more around problems. It was the default on psychology. So there's three things, mate. I wish I knew the difference between me as an athlete and as a person and not take it so seriously. Then I didn't enjoy it, and then I stopped running at 27, 28. I then wish I had some skills around this to control the nerves and to be able to self-regulate. I think I would have enjoyed it more and probably gone another couple of years and improved, because I improved a lot my last year. Like my 1500 metre time dropped 4 seconds, which is a lot. I still hadn't hit my peak. I trained technical. I trained physical. I'd flog myself. We were doing 100K a week. I didn't train the psychological. So you can see for me it's personal. I love what I'm doing now. There's a part of me thinks that if I didn't have those mistakes, would I be teaching what I'm doing now? So I don't have anger or regret that I didn't do it. It's more, I don't want any of our young boys to make the same mistakes. So I love giving them the skills. I won't mention their names because they're only young players, but we've got a few train and trial. They're 17, 18. They come up after and their eyes are like this. And Maisie, what about this? I freaking love that because I think that can make a difference, not just as a footballer, but for their lives as a person.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've never asked you that. Like, we've known each other for 3 years now and I've never asked that. But I sort of wanted to get a feel of why you're so passionate about this space. And I think listening to your answers, because potentially you wish you did have someone to
like you. I wish I had someone to help me with that. And then now it isn't. It's not through missed opportunity. I don't know whether I'd be learning like that range summary. I don't think I'd be teaching what I'm doing now. Maybe if I hadn't had those. So my range, I think, doing that and the learning I can take now into what I'm doing. And the final thing as well, as a mental skills coach and doing performance psychology, it's taken me 20 to 25 years. Yeah. So I can talk to one of our boys and nothing throws me. I've done it, I've seen it. Yeah. I've had the mistakes, I've had the success. So you can be neutral in your discussion rather than going, oh, shit.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time.
It's reps and sets again, isn't it?
Yeah, probably a different podcast for another day, that one. Yeah. But I'm just so passionate about it, mate.
Yeah, good. No, and you do a good job. And so appreciate everything you do with myself personally and our group, because you certainly make a positive impact.
And I've got to finish. I'm interviewing you.
Yeah, sorry. I took over.
See what he did there, Wiz? This is going to be a masterclass for people to listen to, and my goal for this was, one, to show what you've done on the journey, but I really want people to think more about how can they teach better, how can they think about educating, and the big thing is that memory recall and transference of learning. So, I've learned a lot, and I've really enjoyed today.
Good on you, Maisie. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.